Okay, let's go ahead and get started. I want to welcome everybody to the Wednesday night live session. This is our second one of the year, and we're very happy to have Stanley Dash from TradeStation with us tonight. And before I introduce Stan, I want to just go through a couple administrational points so you know how to get around the webinar console in front of you. What I suggest is first locate in the console the questions window. That's how you're going to communicate with Stan and myself, and that is kind of like a chat window, a two-way chat window. Now there is a chat window also, and that window is reserved for us to put things like links up that you click on and so forth, but you can't communicate to us through the chat window. You have to use the questions window. Another thing I suggest is once you find the questions window, there is a little arrow to the left of the X on the right-hand side of the questions window. What I would do is double-click on that arrow so it opens the window into a separate window that you can enlarge and stretch like a normal Windows window. And that way you can actually see it better and it's easier to use. So go ahead and get acquainted with that and get it set up how you'd like it. You can also click on the little arrow in the chat window if you have enough room on your desktop, and also open that into a separate window too, and it may be easier for you to use as well. We are going to put some links in the chat area that you're going to want to have access to and click on, so become familiar with also locating the chat window and knowing how to use that. We are recording the session, and the recording will be emailed out tomorrow. And we'll also put the recording in our archive section at the traderscoach.com website. The other thing too is every Wednesday we're going to be having these Wednesday night live sessions. And we're having a new speaker every week in the industry. And we really are making a good effort to get good quality speakers like Stan tonight that can really teach us something. And I'm really excited to have Stan here tonight because he's going to talk to us about TradeStation's RadarScreen. Now, I use RadarScreen all the time. In fact, we have the Applied Reality Trader Scanner developed for RadarScreen, and it just is a phenomenal tool. I can't tell you how much easier it makes my life to be able to scan all the markets and be able to do it efficiently and quickly on any time frame I want. And Stan's going to show you how to get it all set up. The other nice thing about RadarScreen is that, you know how sometimes you need to have a whole bunch of charts if you want to look for certain different price levels and things like that? Well, you don't have to do that if you have RadarScreen. With RadarScreen, you can basically not have as many charts up, but still keep on top of the markets you want to monitor. And Stan will cover that tonight too. I also want to mention our representative. We have a representative, a senior account executive at TradeStation that has just done a great job for us, and I think he's here in attendance tonight. And his name is Jeffrey Corbin. And we've got some information. Gene's going to put some information up there, and I'm going to also display some information after Stan speaks on how to contact him. But he's also got some great offers on how to get RadarScreen and so forth by just simply opening an account with TradeStation. So we're going to go over that at the end of the presentation. But for right now, I just want you to pay attention to what Stan says about RadarScreen and how to use it. Because I know we have a lot of people here at TradersCoach.com, our students, that use TradeStation's RadarScreen and are always looking for ways in which to use it more efficiently. Now, some of you may not be familiar with Stan. I think most of you are. He's been in the business for a long time. In fact, he started his career on Wall Street at E.F. Hutton & Company in 1975. So Stan's been around for quite some time in the markets. All right, his experience includes institutional and retail trading, management, and compliance. He was also an active floor trader at one of the leading U.S. futures and options exchanges. His relationship with TradeStation began as a consulting arrangement back in 1997 and turned into a full-time position in 2003. You know, I work with Stan quite a lot every Wednesday on the pre-market briefs, and it's kind of funny because Stan and I were talking. Stan usually introduces me, and now I'm actually introducing him. So a little bit of a role reversal here tonight, which is kind of fun. But Stan is great. He's a Vice President Applied Technical Analysis at TradeStation. If you go to any of the trade shows throughout the country, you've probably seen Stan speak. He's always there, and he's always helping people. So without further ado, Stan, I'm going to turn it over to you. I want to thank you so much for being here, and I want to thank everybody for attending.
Bennett, thank you very much for the nice introduction and the invitation to be here, and also in giving my bio. Thank you for letting everybody know that I'm old. I guess that's the way I interpret when somebody says how long I've been in the business and the companies I've been with that are no longer in business. But anyway, thank you for the introduction. Thank everyone for being here. And I did look at the list of names of people who are logged in. We can see those, and I see a lot of people I certainly know through TradeStation and from other places, and people, some names popped up of people I haven't seen in a long time, so it's nice to see you, and I'm glad that you came. I do appreciate it. We're going to talk about RadarScreen this evening, and I do want to Ben really put it the right way when he talked about getting a different way to work through data and keep up real time with data, different way from a chart. And I'm going to emphasize that. And I don't want you to think of this as a training class. Not all of this will stick and sink in, but some of the little maybe tips and tricks will. But if you can get your head around what RadarScreen is capable of, I think you'll really appreciate it and make better use out of it. I happen to think it is probably the most unique tool in the entire TradeStation universe. And I think it really brings together what we try and do with lots of data and history and real-time technical analysis, research, and decision-making in our trading. And I think RadarScreen is really the top of the pyramid in that way. In many ways, much more than charting, and hopefully I can communicate that effectively. Now, I do have some slides. The slides will help me introduce some topics, and then we'll spend some time right in the platform. So I'm going to do my best to navigate through this, and I'm going to keep an eye on the questions as best I can. Try and hang on to them a little bit if they're directly for me, but I will do my best to keep an eye on those as they come in. One of the things that I want to mention is also at the end, I'll remind you about Jeff. Bennett was nice enough to mention my colleague Jeff Corvin. I'll mention that again, and we'll give you his contact info, although Gene did put it in the chat. But we do have a special offer if you're on and you want to open up an account with us. Of course, we do appreciate the opportunity for that, so I won't let the sales moment go completely unused, but I will mention that a little bit at the end. So we'll be talking about TradeStation's RadarScreen, markets and indicators in real time. Well, usually when you say markets and indicators in real time, people either think of a quote table or a chart, and that's where we're really going to bring the two together. That's really what RadarScreen is all about. Now let me see if I can navigate here to my disclosure, of course, which I will put up for a minute or two. It's not only my obligation, but it's the correct thing to do. Please be appropriate and prudent with your risk capital. Make those judgments for yourself and make them properly, please. Anything I talk about here, any styles of analysis or more particular markets or ways of looking at markets, are just to be taken as part of our discussion and not a recommendation. We are not a recommending firm. Despite how much we do in the education area, they really are not recommendations. And of course, when you get involved in trading, backup power, backup internet, that those few dollars a month for that extra internet service that seems like a nuisance fee can be a lifesaver that one time that you need it. Not to mention the fact that one of my key backups is an index card with the trade desk phone number on it that hangs right up above my router here. So the low-tech phone is often our best save. Now, in order to put RadarScreen in some context as I begin to dig into this, we have this kind of nice slide we use to lay it out. If you could monitor, scan, sort hundreds of symbols at a time, obviously you can't do that with a chart, but if you could do that through hundreds of symbols at a time, real time, if you could do that with the same kinds of indicators you use in charting, if you're used to using show me studies with bar patterns or moving average indicators or oscillators, if you could do that in multiple bar intervals, in other words, not be restricted to, say, 60-minute bars, but be able to do it in 3-minute bars or 5-minute bars or a mixture of them, however you currently look at the market. And if you could do all that with real-time alerts, and if you could sort that list of hundreds of symbols automatically, so it would automatically bring to the top the ones that are hot, that are meeting your criteria, that are crossing over or breaking out, whatever the indicator criteria are. That's what RadarScreen is all about. It's the ability to do what we might do on a single chart, but across hundreds of symbols at a time. Now, we sometimes refer to it as tabular charting, which I guess is a bit of an oxymoron, but maybe it gets the point across. Each row in RadarScreen, and as I said, I'm going to click over to RadarScreen in just a minute. Each row in RadarScreen is a virtual chart. So when you open a RadarScreen window, create a RadarScreen window, and I'm going to walk you through some of that, it's as if each symbol you put into this list is loading a chart into the background, into the memory. It's not displaying the chart, but it's loading that data in so that it can make the calculations in RadarScreen on the historical data the same way it would as if you did load a chart. So that in each row we describe as a virtual chart, so I can have hundreds of rows in a RadarScreen page. I can make historically based calculations and indicators, and because they're in a table, I can scroll through them or I can sort through them instantly. Now I'm going to go to TradeStation, so that's what you should see in here. Let me make sure I'm on the right spot that I want to start with. I'm going to push the fonts up here a little bit. I want to give you a little orientation and let you know what's in here. This is a RadarScreen window. I took off the order bar, so if there are TradeStation users out there wondering why my desktop looks a little different, I made some room by taking out the order bar and the position graph bar. I just cleaned it up so we could focus on RadarScreen. Now, if you look at the RadarScreen window, no, let me mention one other thing first. On the left, in the Tools section of the shortcut bar, this is where we have all the data analysis, data retrieval tools. All the trading tools are in this Tools section on the shortcut bar. And I just want to point out that this icon says RadarScreen. If you do not subscribe to RadarScreen, you have an icon in that same spot that says quotes. You have an icon in there that says quotes. Now, if you subscribe to RadarScreen, when you log off and log back on, instead of quotes, it says RadarScreen, because you don't have both. You don't have the simple, conventional default quotes window if you have RadarScreen. RadarScreen is included in the fee waiver if you qualify by volume. Otherwise, there is a fee. As I mentioned, we'll have a special offer at the end. But I think it's well worth it, and most of you are probably active enough for the fee waivers, and we'll be very helpful on giving you a startup period to help you get going with it. But I wanted to point that out because sometimes people say to me, they'll look at the tools and they'll say, well, I have quotes, I don't have RadarScreen. Well, then you're not subscribing to it. Subscribe, log off, back on, and boom, that icon suddenly changes from quotes to RadarScreen. Sydney, I see your question. I will come to that on setting alerts. We're going to discuss that a little bit. I'll help you out with that. So in this is one page of a RadarScreen window, and I'm going to give you a couple of like I said, kind of technical notes. They may or may not sink in. You can always watch our videos on our website to get more information. You can have any number of RadarScreen windows, just like you can have any number of chart windows. And each RadarScreen window can have as many as 8 pages. So right here, if you look at the bottom of my window, if you can see that, I have 2 pages. I set these up because I want to walk you through a couple of things. So this is one RadarScreen window with 2 pages. You can add more pages. You can add more windows. You'll see others as we go through this. Now, when you first look at this RadarScreen window, at this page in this RadarScreen window, you're thinking, well, it looks like a quote window. If I look across the top, I have a list of symbols. I'm not sure what interval means. I'm going to tell you in a minute. Last, net change, bid ask, really pretty conventional quote fields. Now what I did is I loaded in the NASDAQ 100 list. So let me just hint right now at the idea that you can load in pre-built lists, or you can put symbols in one at a time just by typing them in the cell. Or you can combine them in that sense if you want. You could put in a list and then remove some of the things from it or add some other things. The lists are available from our site. It directly links to the platform. I'll show you where those are in a minute. Suffice it for now to say that I loaded in the NASDAQ 100 list. So most of these column headings, as I said, and the columns are pretty self-explanatory. Last, net change. There's nothing exciting in here. But there's a column that's labeled interval. There's a column that's labeled interval. Well, why do I have an interval column? What does interval mean? It's just a quote list. Well, the interval column means that each of these symbols, yes, those are simple quote fields. The fields you're looking at, last, net change, bid ask, are not interval related. They have nothing to do with that 5 min in the interval column. But the 5 min means that what's loaded in the memory that you don't see in the background are 5-minute bars for each of these symbols. It's as if we've loaded 100 or 101 with the NASDAQ symbol, NASDAQ index up at the top, 101 different 5-minute bar charts into memory. Not displaying them, but into memory. Well, now, what can we do with them? Well, let's take a look at this. Let's click on Insert Indicator. Now, it's going to open up a dialog box, and the dialog box lists indicators. You look at the little drop-down, indicator, show me, paint bar. So a heads up for you, you cannot put a strategy into RadarScreen. But let's take a look. I'll leave this on indicator, and most of the indicators you use in charting are in here. Some you'll see are some custom items, the names you might not recognize. Most of the indicators you see in here are the same ones in charting, and there are sometimes duplicate versions because one is written more for a graphic display and one is written more for a tabular format, a sheet like this. I'm going to put slow stochastics in here. I'm going to walk you through a little of this, and then like Julia Child, I started the souffle earlier, so I'll show you the finished product. Now here's slow stochastics. I'm not going to format it. We can do that. I'll come back to that in a little while. I'm just going to click OK. Now here's what came into the slow stochastics. We have 4 columns. We have a main column and then I should say 4 subheadings. Let's put it that way. So here are the values slow K and slow D. And here are the overbought and oversold. Now if you picture in a chart, we will open up some charts, but if you picture a chart, you can see that 80 and 20 overbought and oversold are just your horizontal lines. These 4 columns, these 4 subheads, are the 4 plots that you would see in a chart, the K and D lines, as well as the overbought and oversold horizontals. Well, you can leave the overbought and oversold columns there, but of course those don't change. Nothing's ticking now, so you don't see it. But these would never change because these are just horizontals in a chart. One thing you can do if you want is to right-click on the heading, show hide, and I can hide overbought, and I can hide oversold if I care to do that. You don't have to do that, but sometimes it cleans it up. If you put momentum in and you have a 0 line, you just have a column of zeros that take up space. Doesn't change any of the calculations, and it doesn't change the display. Okay, so now keep in mind what this is. Let me tie this back because it's really important as you get your head around what RadarScreen is about. So there's now a slow stochastic indicator in this chart, in this RadarScreen window, not a chart. It's showing me slow K and slow D. Okay, it's calculating the same way as if it was on a 5-minute chart. It is on a 5-minute bar structure because that's what we have in here. So if we created a 5-minute chart of Apple, and we will take a look at some things like that, slow K and slow D would be these values right here. If you've ever been in a position, and Bennett alluded to this in his introduction, where you're trying to watch more charts than you possibly can, you're going from chart to chart to chart, RadarScreen is essentially following hundreds of charts at a time. Now what we need to do, in addition to getting the data in and then retrieving what we need, is get it to sort, get it to give me alerts, get it to get my attention when something happens that I'm interested in. But just to get your head around it to begin with, I now have the slow stochastics on 101 symbols, and I haven't made a single chart. Okay, now let's take a look at this. I'm going to right-click again on that header, format slow stochastic for all the symbols. So I'm going to bring up the format dialog, and I'm going to go to the alerts tab. Same alerts tab that you see in charting. But because I clicked format slow stochastic for all symbols, I'm going to set the alert for the entire page, every symbol in the page at once. Now you can do this cell by cell, or maybe I should say symbol by symbol. For instance, if I only wanted an alert for Apple, I could just double click there, and now I'm formatting for Apple, which at times you will want to do. And maybe this is a good time to point out Sydney's question. I'm sorry, yes, Sydney's question about the alerts. If you want an alert on anything in here, double click in the cell. Now, so for instance, maybe I just want an alert on Apple if it makes a new high. So I can double click, go to alerts, I'll enable it, and I'll set the alert on whatever price I want, 560, 562, or whatever price level I want above the market. That's as easy as that, but I want to get into the settings a little more closely. Let me come back to slow stochastics. In this case, what I'm not so interested in is what happens to a specific issue, a specific symbol or ticker. What I want to do is I want to be able to set an alert so any of these trigger. So if any of these trigger, I'll be able to sort through the list. So let's take a look at that. For the case of an indicator, here's an important point for you to know. We just used, as an example, setting an alert based on the high, and I just typed in a number. For an indicator like stochastics, or like a few of the others we'll look at, the alert is based on whatever is written into the easy language, whatever the alert criteria are that's built in. Now, if you create your own easy language, then you can create your own criteria. If not, then most of the things that we use will use the criteria that are most common. So in this case, we're looking for K and D to be crossing over. But you don't see that here is my point. So you do have to maybe look at the help and check to see what are the alert criteria for this particular indicator. Now here's what I want to do. I want to enable the alert, but I want to show you some of the settings because this is important. You can set the alert to make noises and beeps and pop-ups. It's the same way you do it in charting. And for instance, if we had set the alert for 562 in Apple, I might want beeps and pop-ups. I might have a short position, or I might be looking to take a long, or it's making a new high of some kind. So I may really want beeps and pop-ups. I might on a noisy alert, a really attention-getting alert. But when we're setting an alert for a whole column of symbols, I usually don't want, on an indicator like this, like stochastic, I usually don't want beeps and pop-ups and noises, because if they start to go, boy, it'll drive me nuts. Well, all I want to do is I want to put a little mark in the cell. So if it's true, I'll see a marker, and I can look down the list, and I see, oh, there's a yellow marker. It's true. I don't need beeps and pop-ups. It could be 20 or 30 at a time, and beeps and pop-ups can be very disruptive. So I'm just going to enable the alert. I'm going to leave it continuous, which means it'll stay in the on setting, but no noise. It's only for scanning for alerts in RadarScreen, and I'll click OK. All right, now, take a look at the columns. We're going to get a little more sophisticated in a minute. I do see some of the other questions coming in. Alex, Daryl, I'll do my best. If you take a look, if you can see, and I mean, the colors might be a little bit tough, but if you can see along here, there's a little blue marker. The little blue marker means the alert is enabled. It's in the on position. So I know I have the alert enabled for all of these. Where I have a yellow mark, the alert is true. Now this was up through the end of the day, 4 o'clock Eastern time, so it's not ticking. The last might tick for extended hours, but the indicator is not ticking. So this was true on the last bar of the day. If we were running this during the day and I got a yellow, then it's true at that point in time during the day based on whatever interval I have in this RadarScreen window, which in this case is all 5 minutes. We'll get into some variations on that as well. Now here's an important thing also to get your head around, and we're going to take another step and look at this a little bit differently. Let's see, I really want to be able to sort through this list. I have about 100 symbols, but maybe I have the S&P 500, or I have a custom list that I created of a few hundred stocks. So what I'd really like to do is not just see the yellow. I'd really like some alerts. That's my yellow marker, I'm sorry. but I want to be able to sort these. Now, if I sort these numerically, I can sort these numerically any way I want. I can sort them by price, by volume, let's say. Double click, and now it's descending by volume. I'm sorry, ascending by volume. Double click, descending by volume. Those are our manual sorts. That's fine. But if I do something like that with stochastic, well, I guess I can get the most oversold. Double click again, the most overbought. But it doesn't really mean anything for me. It's not really telling me anything. What tells me something is a change in the condition, which is the alert. So what would be useful instead of a numeric sort, numeric is useful sometimes, but instead of strictly a numeric sort, what can be useful is just pull the trues to the top. Pull the alerts to the top for me. So now let's look at a more sophisticated sorting. I'll click on Format, Sort, and it brings me a sorting dialog just for this page. You'll notice a few things. First, there are 4 sort keys. So I can have 4 sort criteria, and they will work through in this order. Keep in mind that if you use this, if you use these sort keys, which we will, I'll show you on the next example, and they're extremely useful, they're not as useful. They work functionally, but they're not as useful if you're going to sort on numerics. Because how many times do you get a tie in a numeric? See, each key runs, and it only goes to the next key as a tiebreaker. I always used to tell people that it's kind of like how we learned to alphabetize when we were in 2nd grade, which is that we only go to the second letter of the word when the first letter is the same. If all the words have different first letters, we never need to go to the second letter. Well, it's the same thing for these sort keys. So if you're going to sort numerically, let's say by volume, and then you put another criteria as number 2, well, how often are 2 issues have the exact same volume right down to the last digit? Very rarely. But with an alert, you can get ties, and you'll see that as we build a more sophisticated page. So here's what I want to do. I want to sort this. Notice that this is built from the page. So we could sort by slow K and slow D. That would be numeric. But what I want to do is sort by the alert. And I want to pull all the alerts to the top of the page. And then I want to resort. This is moot after hours, but I want to resort every n seconds automatically. This doesn't change the update frequency. This is just the sort frequency. Now we click OK. Boom. Now I see I think I have 8 issues up there. 8 issues that at this moment in time, which of course is the close, but at this moment in time there are 8 issues that are giving me stochastic crossovers. Now that is really, if you can start to get that, I mean that is just the beginning, but that is really what RadarScreen is about. These is on 5-minute. You might look on daily. I'll show you things on daily, on 130-minute. It doesn't matter whether you're doing this on high-speed trading, on short intervals, or on longer ones. I might look at this just in the evening and I say, well, you know, on my dailies here, I've got crossovers in these 10 stocks out of the S&P 500. It's so easy and so fast, and the sorting ability by alert, the numerics now don't matter. I don't care what the number is for the stochastic. What I care is the condition is changing. They're crossing over. Okay. Now I'd like to do is I'm going to click over to page 1. So I'm just going to go over this other tab in the same window. Remember I said that each window, you can have multiple windows, and each window can have as many as 8 tabs. 8 pages represented by the tabs at the bottom. Now I did something here. This is my Julia Child wisecrack about a souffle, that I set this up ahead of time. So let me walk you through what's in here. One thing I want to point out that I don't think I mentioned, and if I did, please just bear with me a moment. Notice how some of the fonts for the headers are in black and some are in blue. The ones that are in black are not historically, they're not calling any historical data, which also means they're independent of this interval. These are not calling histories, so this doesn't use this interval. The concept just doesn't connect. These have blue headers, and the blue headers, I'll make this a little bit bigger, the blue headers means that they are calling historical data, when it also means that they're calling that historical data according to this interval setting. We'll talk about the intervals. I'll show you some variations in a few minutes as we go a little further. Now, if that discussion about histories, about sorting, about alerts made some sense, here's, I think, a very interesting layout, and this would help it click. So in this case, it's the same list. I use the NASDAQ 100 5-minute. And I put in the stochastic again, the slow stochastic. And we set the alerts, and we brought them up to the top. So it's the same issues, Comcast, A, and Intel, and a few others. Now, I also put in a show me study for a key reversal down, show me study for a key reversal up. And I also put in a column with a show me study called volume breakout. Now, you'll see the yellow markers. That means I have alerts set for all of these. And let me go to the format sort so you can see what that looks like, because I set this up ahead. Notice the first key is stochastic slow alert up to the top. So it's going to pull all the stochastic crossovers, the ones that are right now on the current bar, up to the top. And then the second key is key reversal down. So then for those, the tiebreaker is key reversal down. Then the next tiebreaker, key reversal up. Then the next tiebreaker, volume breakout, all set to alerts. The arrows are pointing up. Keep data sorted every 30 seconds. So this is pulling all the trues up to the top for these alerts. The key here is if you're looking at this, you're looking for a confluence of conditions. When I look at this, Comcast is having a stochastic crossover from oversold. Look at the numbers. I've got a key reversal up on this last bar of the day, and it's also on high volume relative to the day. That is a great piece of information. Now, again, this updates real time during the day. Intel, I'm looking for trading opportunities during the day, I see Intel. Aha, I've got a stochastic cross on a key reversal up on high volume. It's really a nice intersection of conditions, and I can see them all. Now, some of these have stochastic crosses, no particular reversal pattern, but some volume information. Here I have a downside reversal in some of these on high volume, upside reversals on high volume. Now, don't forget this is the last 5-minute bar of the day, so you're going to get a lot of relatively high volume bars because you're right at the end of the day. During the course of the trading day, this column would have, well, it could have any number of yellows, but usually you're going to get 10, 15, 20 out of the NASDAQ 100 that are showing little volume spikes intraday. End of the day, of course, we get the volume rush. Now let me take a quick look at the questions. I will show you the symbol lists in just a minute. We'll do that before we get into some more detailed analytics. We talked about price alerts. Loading your portfolio, Daryl, you can do that. And we probably have some tools that can help you with that. Otherwise, there might be some in the Trading App Store. If not, we might have some around that you could use to pull your positions directly in. There's no automatic. There's no click. But there are indicators that have been written, and they're available that call your trade manager. In other words, that check your account, put your positions in, put P&L information in, long and short information. If you need to get a hold of me, I'll put up my email at the end, or you can get to me through Bennett. If he doesn't have a tool available, we would have something around that can help you with that. There's no supplied one in here, but we can help you with that. You can set an alert on any of the columns, Aaron. Any of the columns, you can set an alert. So, you know, when I was talking about Apple before, I'm not going to resort this list, but you know, if my concern is Comcast going to 56, I can put it in the last column. I can put it in the high column. It doesn't really matter. It's just a price alert. It's just a numeric alert. So you can use any of these column headings. Now, usually, you know, if I have a position in something and I'm watching that particular stock, then I might just use the last column, and I just want to set a high alert. You know, maybe if it's Intel, I just want to set it at 27.25. And on alerts, I'll click Enable, and I will do it as with my noisy alert, I like the beeps and pop-ups, and I'll click OK. So it's maybe hard to see the blue marker, but there is a blue marker there. It's just one cell because I have a position perhaps in that particular issue. And then I will get beeps and pop-ups for that because maybe that's a trading position or a potential position. Okay, now let's go a little further with this. We talked about RadarScreen, and I hope you get the idea what it's capable of. Now let's extend this a little further because we're all still technical analysis junkies and we want to see charts. So I've just given you this great story, and I think it's a great story about how RadarScreen can relieve me of the burden of going chart after chart after chart after chart. But we still like to see charts. And even if I see these three conditions, let's say in Comcast or in Intel, I still want to see the chart. I want to see the chart. That's what I do. So we can create a chart. And here's a chart. Here's Comcast. I'll just open it up a little bit. I'm going to just push the bars apart a little bit so you can see it better. That's the up-down arrow keys, by the way. I just want you to be able to see it a little better. And mostly see the end. So here's the Comcast. I didn't make this bigger, but it's Comcast 5-minute, so it matches what we were doing in RadarScreen. Here's a key reversal up. You see my show me dot. Here you see we're just getting that nudge of a crossover in the stochastic in oversold territory. And I have a volume spike. I got all the pieces together. Now, if you'll notice that in the upper corner of these windows, there's an S button and an I button. And you'll notice these in many places in TradeStation. They're not relevant in every window, so you won't see them in certain places. But otherwise, you'll see them in many places in TradeStation. Well, the S means symbol linking. And it allows me to link this window to another window based on its symbol. So the green, I can make it not linked, then it's just a gray button. You can just click it and it'll auto-link to the first color, which is green. So this chart window and this RadarScreen window are symbol linked. We can also link as to interval. It's analogous. We're not going to do that in here right now, but you can look that up and it works in an analogous fashion. Here's an important thing to know about RadarScreen and symbol linking. The symbol never goes from a chart to RadarScreen. It's a one-way link. It's a one-way link. So just keep an eye on this. I'm just moving this over a little bit so you can see it. If we wanted to see Intel and I click on the Intel symbol in RadarScreen, now this is an Intel chart. And I can see I'm getting a little nudge on the stochastic. I got an upside reversal. I have a high volume bar. Again, the last bar of the day is often high volume, so that's not that unusual. But if I change the symbol in the chart, just by typing it, it will not send it to RadarScreen. The reason for that is because most of us build RadarScreen pages with lists of symbols. A list of 50, a list of 500, a list of 1,000. And you don't want to change a chart and you mess up your list. So window linking, symbol linking with RadarScreen is one way. No matter what I do in here, I can change the chart here to a symbol that's not in RadarScreen. It'll change the chart, but it won't send it to RadarScreen. But any chart here, any symbol here that I click will load in. And you can see, we can look at Garmin. Garmin also coming out of oversold, high volume, no reversal. Here's Garmin coming out of oversold, no reversal showing, high volume. They should match up perfectly. They will match up perfectly. We're working the same calculations off the same data. This gives me breadth. The chart gives me depth. The chart lets me see a symbol in depth with its indicators. RadarScreen lets me see breadth, lets me see what's happening across a whole list and gets my attention to the ones that are critical for me, the ones that are most important for me. Now, there are a few other things that I want to show you, a few other workspaces I want to go through to show you actual uses of this and get you thinking about how you might use this. We use it for in a lot of different ways. We use it for what I was referring to research and data mining, as well as real, day-to-day trading applications. But there are a few other, I guess, managerial items that I wanted to show you. I want to show you these symbol lists. If you click Insert Symbol List, I'm sorry, I'm in the chart. You have to be in RadarScreen. Insert Symbol List. You'll see there are 3 categories of symbol lists. One is custom. We give you a few. You can build your own. You can see there are a bunch in there that I built, and then I change them and delete them. These are just text files. You can build them right out of a text editor. We'll show you how to do it. You can build them right in you're using Excel and then save it as text. You can build them in RadarScreen. If you want to make a symbol list out of these first 20 symbols, I don't know how many I highlighted, all I need to do is right-click, and I can save this as a symbol list. Append selected symbols to a custom symbol list. And then instead of appending them to one of the existing lists that I have in here, I could say Create List. And I'll create a brand new list. So you could do it outside TradeStation with a text editor. You could do it inside TradeStation right from a RadarScreen page. Maybe you've worked on something and you want to take this list, put it on another RadarScreen page, and do some more detailed calculations or analysis. Now let me go back to the Insert Symbol List dialog to show you what was here. I mentioned custom. These are symbol lists from Reuters. I haven't used these recently. I used to use them a little bit more, but you're welcome to look through them. They sometimes can be very convenient if you're trying to work through, obviously, different sectors. And then there are TradeStation symbol lists, and I tend to use these more, maybe because they're a little more generic. Things like index components. And where did I get this list of the NASDAQ 100? Click NASDAQ indexes, NASDAQ 100. You can click S&P, the S&P 500's in there. You can take a look at Dow Jones, and you'll have the Dow 30, the REIT index, industrials, transportations, utilities. You can do a nice little sub-calculation on Dow theory. And then there are some others. There are groups of indexes. These are not index components. This one that says indexes are lists of indexes, and the one above it are index components. Industry groups, largest volume stocks. There is some volume information in here on largest volume stocks. That's useful, I think, primarily for shorter-term traders, but I mean, if it helps you use it, I tend to look at either industry sector or the index components, just because it's the way I approach things, and of course, a lot of the public speaking that I do. So just to make something clear, let me do this once more. I'm going to insert an additional page, so you'll see another page pop in here. Now there's a page 3, and I'm not going to spend much time on this. I just wanted to make clear that I can type. I'm just using keyboard entry. I can type symbols in. And it doesn't matter what they are. They can be futures. They can be equities. They can be indexes. Whatever you type in, as long as it's in the feed and you have access to it, can go in. And then, of course, as I also said, insert symbol list. And maybe you want to use one of our lists, index components, Dow Jones. I want to use the Dow Industrials, and click OK, and there are the Dow Industrials. One other managerial note, and then we'll look at some more analytics that I hope you'll find interesting. You may have noticed in this was the page we used when I was first introducing this. And then here's that page 1 that I had cooked up before. You may have noticed that when we sorted, I kept the index separate from the other symbols. Now the reason I did that is because when I put in the symbol list, I could remove the index, but I kind of want it in there. But I don't want it to mix in with the symbols. I want to see the index separately. When RadarScreen sorts, it will not sort across blank rows or these label rows. It will not sort across blanks or label rows. So if for some reason I want to do a subsort above this symbol, I can highlight it, insert blank row, and now those two groups will sort separately. Maybe now I want to take the top group and sort by volume, or I have another indicator I want to put in and do an additional sort. Now, whatever is between blank rows or label rows will sort separately as a separate group. Same criteria, it just would be, let's say, an ascending sort of this group, and then an ascending sort of this group. It won't collate them again. insert blank row, or you can also insert a label row. My favorites, if I could spell. You can put whatever you want in there as a label row. And if you don't like it, highlight it, delete key, it's gone. Delete the blank, mix them back together again. Okay. Okay. Richard was asking about the change the symbol list to the saved sorts and criteria stay. Let me make something clear about the symbol lists, Richard. This may answer the question. The symbol lists are text files that you're either pulling off our site, or if it's a custom list, it's saved locally on your machine. If I delete some of the symbols from here, it does not change the NASDAQ 100 list, which comes from the TradeStation server. If I put in a custom list and I delete some of the symbols here, it does not change my text file saved on my hard drive of my custom list. So any management you do in the RadarScreen window does not change a list on our servers or on your hard drive unless you highlight them and re-edit the list and make some changes or save over, like saving any file, save as, save over. Okay. Yeah, Fred, I'm going to get onto that in just a second on bar intervals. I think we're doing pretty well because I got a little more to cover, and we'll walk through a couple of other things. What I want to do in the next few things is more related to different analytical approaches. These are things that I've shown. Some of them I've shown to people. The next workspace is something that one of the attendees sent in yesterday, and it came to me. So I see Jim Flynn is on. So Jim, these were the ones we were corresponding about yesterday, but it helps me make some points. So let's see what we can look at. Let me just click over to this workspace. And first, let's take a look at this. Now, I'm only putting this up in response to a question that came up yesterday, but see if it helps and if it makes sense in what our context is now. This is the default MACD indicator. This is the default MACD indicator. Let me make the page a little wider. I think I hid one of the plots. I did hide the 0 line plot. So that's the default MACD indicator, the same way you put it in a chart. MACD, MACD average, MACD diff, which is the histogram, a 0 line, and then there's an additional column that you would not see in a chart, which is how many bars ago there was a crossover. Now, most of you know, if you've worked with MACD, that the two MACD lines crossing is the same as the histogram crossing over 0. So in a chart, we don't count the number of bars, but in a tabular format, we can count the number of bars since the last crossover. Well, obviously, if it's 0, that means this is the current bar that's crossing. So again, as we did with stochastics and with the other tools earlier, I formatted MACD. I said enable alert, alert continuously. Shh, don't make any noise. Just give me the little marker in the cell. I don't want beeps and pop-ups. So I put in the MACD. I set my alerts. And then I went to format, sort. I put in MACD alert, pull them up to the top, ascending, pull them up to the top. Every 30 seconds, this is probably moot. I made them daily interval because I think that's what Jim had mentioned in his email. So it's not going to, it could change intraday, but that's relatively rare. But 30 seconds may be a little bit too frequently. You can change that number, obviously. So now it pulled up to the top. So I know that Adobe, Altair, we're having MACD crossovers today. Now, here's a chart that I linked to it. I'm trying to make this easy to see. You know what? Let me make a little room here. That might be a little better. I linked the chart to it. So you see the green button. So these two are linked. So if I want to say, oh, wow, Adobe, okay, let me see what's happening there. Oh, all right, we had that big breakout today, a strong market. I have the crossover here. Of course, these lines crossing is the same as the histogram crossing over 0. Let's take a look at Cerner. Got a crossover? Okay, interesting. This lets me see all of them. I put the NASDAQ 100 in. You can put in as many stocks as you want and mix and match symbols. There's no customizing in here. What is the key? Set the interval the way you want. Let's talk about that. That question came up. Let me take one symbol. Let me just take Adobe at the top just so you can see it. If I right-click, format Adobe, I can change the interval. I can change it to, whatever number of minutes. And I'm going to show you one that mixes and matches. So any symbol could be these 100 could all be on different intervals. I don't know if that makes sense to me. If I'm looking for a MACD crossover, presumably I'm looking at it across intervals. Across symbols in the same time interval. But you can mix and match if you like. I have another example of mixing and matching in a minute. So it's in format symbol. Here's the thing. We used to have a laugh out of this in some of our old training classes. I used to tell people, I used to ask, so what column do you think you click in to change the interval? And of course everyone in the class would say, well, it must be the interval column. So I would trick everybody. It's the symbol column. If you want to change all of them, format all symbols, you can change the interval on the entire set at once. Same concept. Okay. The chart, Diana, was created manually. So I used the shortcut bar, which is my habit, create a chart. I inserted the indicators, and then I clicked the link. Click the S button to symbol link. It was created manually. If you're interested in a concept called analysis groups, and it's off our topic here, so I don't want to spend too much time on it, but if you make a note for yourself to look up the idea of an analysis group can be used in RadarScreen and charting, and it lets you create it's not exactly a template, but it's the closest word I can find, so work with me. It lets you create a group of analyses that you can dump in one shot. So if every chart you make, you always put on this moving average and that oscillator and this paint bar and these other things, you can save them as an analysis group, and anytime you get to a chart, instead of going one by one, you can just pop in the whole group. Not only does it save them as a group, but here's the best part, it saves your formatting. So you might use a moving average, but you might want to use the 50 bar, or you might like the momentum oscillator, but you don't want a 10, you want a 20. So look up that topic of analysis groups. Diane, I know I see you in a number of the other events. My email will go up. I can send you links to the right pages. But that's the topic. You'll find them. There's a lot of training about it, and Jesus can help you out with that as well. Okay. Now, that was one thing that Jim asked me about. The other thing Jim asked me about was the Hull moving average, although I think we had a little inadvertent miscommunication because I think he had a customized one. But there is an indicator, moving average Hull. The Hull moving average is a specialized, I guess in brief, it's a weighted average of the difference between two other weighted averages. Just to keep it brief, I haven't really worked with it a lot, but that's roughly what the formula is about. But you can put the Hull moving average in here. You can set the alert criteria. You can sort so it comes to the top. In this case, what our alert criteria is, the way it comes with our indicator, is when the close crosses over the Hull line. So in other words, if, well, let's look for one that's true, Akamai. I'll click it. I linked it. The close was under the Hull line. The close is over. Alert is true. Amgen, the close was under the Hull line. Now the close is over. It's a crossover. The alert is true. And it would work in either direction, so I don't know what we have that was particularly negative today, maybe intuitive. Yep, intuitive surgical. So here we above, close below, the alert is true. I don't really love the gray colors like that. You can customize those, but that's the way the default comes up with that gray color. Okay. And if you, one thing to remember, I know there's some other questions. I want to show you a few other things, and we'll be on track in the next 10, 15 minutes or so. One thing to remember is if you do create your own easy language, and we have classes for that, obviously, you create the alert criteria on your own, so you can customize that. The crossover, Randall, the MACD default alert is a crossover. It's a histogram crossing 0. The lines are on a different scale. It's not the lines crossing 0. It's the two lines crossing. The two lines crossing is the same as the histogram crossing 0. And that's really what the signal is. That's your basic MACD signal. Okay, so it's not these lines crossing. These lines aren't scaled to this 0. That's irrelevant. All right, good. So let's take a look at a few other things. Jim, I hope that was helpful for you, and we can correspond again if you need something else on those. Now, I want to show you a few other things that I've done with RadarScreen. I mentioned that one of the things it's very useful for is, we could call it data mining, is research, is background information. So I have a few examples of things that are like that, and then some example of something that's a practical trading application, and I'll give you a link to download that other one if you'd like it. This is something I introduced a while ago, and I come back to it again and again because the topic is so useful. This is one big indicator. All these columns are in one big indicator, which I called range gauge. And the only other column in here is interval, just so you can take that column out. You don't have to show it, but I keep it in there just so we all get our bearings on what's in here. And what the analysis here was about analyzing volatilities, analyzing trading range for a list of symbols. Now, your style of trading might say, you might be thinking, I want high volatility, I want low volatility, I want trending, trading range. How do you find those? We won't get that far along, but that was the thought process going on in here. So what I did is I built this range gauge that reports out, it calculates and reports out a whole bunch of information about the price ranges of the last 100 days. 100 because that's my setting. It could be changed. Days because that's my interval. So this could be changed, so it's not 100. It could be something else. And if I change the bar interval, it would be based on the last 100 30-minute bars if I choose. So it calculates the average daily range for each of these symbols in points and in percent. Obviously, percent is important. Maybe I want it to be day trading, so I need something that moves a lot during the day. Well, sure, Google moves a lot of points, but that's because it's so high priced. But actually, others will move more in percentage terms. So I might get more play out of a lower price stock, which has a greater percent move. Average daily range in points and in percent. The largest daily range of the last 100 days, and the smallest daily range of the last 100 days in points and in percent. The range of the entire 100-day period, in other words, from the highest high of the last 100 to the lowest low, and that value in percent. The number of bars in that range. This is interesting. There's an interesting concept in this that I don't have a finished product on. But the concept is, if I have a big range in the last 100 bars, so I have my period range is big, let's say, and those bars are close together, there must have been a hell of a good run somewhere in the middle there. Now, that's why I have bars in range. So in some cases, I might see, well, the period range was big and they were close together, so there was big move in there. Or the period range was big, but it was far apart, so it was a slow, gentle move in there. That's the concept behind bars in range. In other words, how many bars apart were the highest high and the lowest low in the last 100 bars. And it's a concept that I think is worth pursuing, and I don't have too much more to give you on that. This is the volatility standard deviation, essentially. It's a nod to options traders. So you get some idea of the annualized standard deviation, at least on average for the last 100 days. So it's just another way to measure volatility. Now this could update during the day, but this is not a trading tool. This is a research, a data mining tool, a tracking tool. Now here's one that's a little more, that's intraday. Here's a similar concept. I'm looking for things to trade. What markets are going to give me some juice, are going to give me action that I want. Some of them may give me too much action. So what I did is I created an indicator. I called it Move Counter, if you can see it here. And it works in RadarScreen and in charting, so it's the same indicator in both places. And I have it set to calculate how many moves of at least 1% occur intraday in the last 10 days. I'll rephrase it. How many moves of at least 1% happen today in each issue? And what's the average number of moves of at least 1% over the last 10 days? So if I'm looking for action, I might say, well, it's not too surprising we should see Tesla, Sears, Netflix up at the top. In some cases, some trading strategies might do better with something a little more modest. Maybe something whips too much. And I might be better off with something that moves a little more modestly. This also lets me see that, a symbol like Fastenal had 15 moves of at least 1% today, but on average only 4.3. So what happened today? The indicator here and the markers giving me the same information. So I know if we look at Tesla, I had 35 moves today of at least 1%. Blue is up moves, red is down moves, and my average over the last 10 days is 17 moves of that size. So now I've got a little better analysis of what's possible in these issues when I'm looking for intraday trading candidates. We can change the number, we can change that percent. If you're a day trader, how much of a move are you looking for a good day trade? It's rhetorical. I don't know either. But that's why I said it's a 1%, and it's an input that can be adjusted. And these will all work real time, so this maybe is a little bit of a crossover between a research tool and a real-time tool, because during the course of the day, this will build. Every time you get a move, you get a blue dot or a red dot, depending on whether it's an up or a down move, and it builds during the day, and then at the end of the day, you get your average for the last 10 days. But here you see the connection, RadarScreen charting. RadarScreen is able to look into the data. Let's take a look at two more, and these relate to some questions that were up there. So let's take a look at these. I'll make the font a little bigger so it'll be easier to see. Okay. I have a very dear friend who used to be a member of the New York Stock Exchange, and he and I have done a lot of technical work together over the years. And we are always discussing bar intervals. And a very common question that I'll get at classes and events is, what's the best bar interval to trade? And I hope you know that there's no answer to that. Bar intervals are data sampling. Bar intervals are a way to slice up the data, to take a sample, to take a test, to take a sample and run some numbers against it. So is it best to sample, if you live in Nevada, how often do you check the rain gauge? How often do you sample the rain gauge? Versus if you live in Puerto Rico in the rainforest. So there's really no answer for that. But what I did is I created this little test in our discussions to try and see if we have a trading system, and I'd work with this friend on some strategies. If we have a trading strategy that we want the bars to be approximately 1% in range, and I'm using that as an example, but we want time-based bars. We're not looking at range bars or momentum bars. A lot of stuff could be done there. We said, well, maybe for different symbols, we need to use different bar intervals. So I set this up, and if you see, each issue appears 5 times. It's just a list of big caps that I threw in here. 5 times, each with a different interval. I looked at weekly, daily, 195-minute, which is 2 bars per day. 130-minute, which is 3 bars per day, 65-minute, which is 6 bars per day. It's not for micro trading, but we wanted to get an idea. And if I'm looking for 1%, well, in bank, maybe I should be using a 195-minute or a 130-minute. And if I look at Ford, maybe I should step it down to the 130 or even down to a 65-minute to get a bar of about 1%. And for GE, maybe I step up to 195 or a daily to get a bar of about 1%. Now these obviously numbers are going to change as new data comes in. But the whole idea was to be a little scientific about choosing a bar interval. If I want something that's about 1% or any other number, what can I examine? What can I see? Here's how I can compare it. I also created a standard deviation in these numbers so I could see its reliability. In other words, if I decide in Ford that I'm going to go with a 130 or a 195, well, the 195-minute had a little bigger average range in percent terms, but it was much more reliable because it has a lower standard deviation. And that's what this last column was created for, to give me some idea of the reliability or the dispersion around the mean. So it's a very interesting way. In this case, people are always saying, how can I test the interval? Well, that's very difficult to test intervals, but I can at least get an idea of the characteristics for an issue by looking at its history. The ranges in here were based on the last 100 bars. So in each of these tests, we were testing the percent range, average percent range over the last 100 weeks or 100 days or 100, 195-minute bars. We went consistently 100 bars, but there are different intervals in each row. And again, each row is set, right-click, format, and here's where you set the intervals. You can, I know I don't have an example here, but someone who uses, let's say, 3 rows, I tend to look at weekly, daily, and 130-minute bars for stocks. I don't micro trade them. So weekly, daily, and 130-minute. So you could put those 3 in and put your indicators in, like stochastics or momentum, put it in, and you'll see it in all 3 time frames just by putting them together. Okay, the last item I will show you, and then I will check for some more questions and we'll tie this up, is something actually that I published in our analysis concepts paper. So if you're interested in this, I'm told that I can put a link in here, so let's see if it works. Okay, that's an analysis concepts paper that I published that has these tools in it and is written up. This was a little bit different. This uses RadarScreen to examine the volume in the pre-market session. Here was the concept. I had heard a number of speakers talk about the idea of monitoring the volume and the price action pre-market, which I will define as 8 o'clock to 9:30 New York time, and then using that as a tip-off for what might happen in the regular session. So I built this indicator. This indicator involves using custom sessions. You have to set this up the right way. It's not that difficult, and all the tools are with that paper, and I encourage you to read the paper. But you have to set it up the right way because you need to zone in on the pre-market session. In this RadarScreen page, I don't care what happens after 9:30. In this RadarScreen page, what I care about what happens 8 to 9:30 in the morning, and then it freezes. Then it stops updating because I don't care anymore. So what it does is it calculates the pre-market volume 8 to 9:30 in the morning, and then it stops. That's it. You're done. Then it calculates the average pre-market volume over the last 10 days. Now here was the tricky part. In order to calculate that, I had to calculate the average pre-market volume in the last 10 days of pre-market sessions. I had to make sure it didn't take any of the regular session in there. So I had to segregate that data. That's why average pre-market volume, that's low, it's 10-day average, but they're small numbers because it's only that 8 to 9:30 Eastern time period. Then I looked at this value, the current pre-market volume, as a percent of its average. And that's really the heart of the analysis. In other words, is it a big deal that AMAT traded 8,000 shares? 8,000 shares certainly doesn't sound like a lot. But 8,000 shares is almost 500% of its normal pre-market volume. Whether that's significant or not is up to you. But the numeric aspect of this would not really tell us that much, because the pre-market volumes are always lower. Is it significant that Netflix traded 30,000? We might think it trades a lot, but really it's been averaging a pretty low pre-market volume. That's still 135% of its normal pre-market volume. Short-term traders like to look at this to see what's hot, what's happening, did I miss a piece of news, and how can I follow up on it. The other columns in here are pre-market close. In other words, where did the session close pre-market? So this freezes at 9:30. The net change pre-market, in other words, where is it 9:30 compared to yesterday's 4 p.m.? And the pre-market close minus open. What was the change in just the pre-market session from the open to the close? There's an associated chart with it. All that is written up with the paper. But for traders who are looking for what is moving this morning, I think this is a great way to track pre-market volumes, because you really can't do it by just looking at the number. The number doesn't mean anything. You know, we always expect, you know, Facebook had 500,000 pre-market volume. That sounds a lot pre-market, but it's less than its average of late. And RadarScreen is a great way to zero in, and then with the associated chart. All this is with that paper, so you can download the indicators, you can download all the information on how to set it up, and the workspace itself if you're interested in that. Okay, let me come back to the questions for a minute. I know there are a few that went in there, and I kind of wanted to get through the lay of this, and we want to tie this up. That was percent, that standard deviation question that I think Darryl put up. If you were talking about interval gauge, no, yes, this is percent. This is percent. But I kind of indexed it, so the number doesn't mean much. It's just a relative number. I didn't even have to look back at my notes to see what I did. As I really wasn't concerned, is it 29 or is it 18? That doesn't mean much. I just want to know one is bigger than the other by a lot or a little. So I just created kind of like a whole number indexing for it. Don't get too stuck on that. Like I said, it's just a comparative number to give me some reliability. Richard, the pre-market radar screen, can you use this? If you can see the chat, you can use that link, and I'll give you an email address if you need it. But it is in the chat. I can push it through again. Oh, to organizers and panelists only. Wait a second. I think I blew it. Hang on. Okay, to entire audience. Let me try it again. There you go. Now you should see it. Okay, that's the link where you can get the pre-market tools. And Phil, Phil, I don't know why you don't have that in there. I don't know how old your version is. This is, you know, the latest version. I'll put my email address up, and if you need some help, I can try and help you out with that. No, Fred, it would be a problem on interval gauge. Changing the axes, if you will, and putting the intervals in columns. Oh boy, I think that might be doable with objects. It's going to be a little bit of programming, heavy lifting. Yeah, you could actually do it with objects, but it would involve a fair amount of recoding. Okay, yeah, Jonathan, that link that I just put in the chat is to that paper. So I think we pretty much came to what we wanted to get to here. Let me come back to my slides just for a minute, and it is a little late. So I did promise that I would put this up. You have to contact Jeff for this information. We run these once in a while. You know, he has this information, Jeff Corbett, and I'll give you his contact info again. Or you can get him through Gene and Bennett as well. They'll be glad to help out. But this is something we did put together particularly for this. So yes, we do run different kinds of specials from time to time, but this one is a little sweeter. So, you know, if you're inclined to open an account and do some business with us, we appreciate the opportunity. That's Jeff's contact information again. I'll come back to that in a moment. And that is my contact information. If you, and I'll come back on the slides, I'll come back to Jeff's material. But if you just email me at TS Labs, I see that, and many of you know my associate Fred Pomleden. Fred and I keep an eye on that mailbox, and we do our best. Please don't, if it's tech support, we'll get somebody to help you, but please don't just do those questions. But if it's about our analysis or analytics or something in the training and education area, we'll be glad to help you out. There are, by the way, Alex, server hosts who will run for you. We do not, but there are organizations that will run TradeStation for you, server-based, and we do have web access as well. I think that about runs it for me, Bennett. If you want to take the microphone back, I'll mute mine, and maybe we'll just leave. I'll put this up one more time, and then I'll put up Jeff's information once more.
Stan, that's great. Yeah, that's good. I also wanted to just mention too, Stan, that you know, RadarScreen is what, about $59.95 a month, I think. And you know, this is really a pretty good deal, because if you add that and also the monthly account service, which is $99.95, I mean, they get this for free for 6 months. That's almost $1,000 value right there just for opening up an account. So I hope folks realize what a good deal this offer is here. And then you get up to $500 in commission rebates for the first 90 days of trading. So it doesn't get any better than that. Again, contact Jeffrey Corbin. He's the man that can set you up with this. And mention that, of course, that you heard about it here from Stan on the webinar tonight, and he'll take good care of you. And there's his contact information. Stanley, I wanted to thank you for really a great webinar. I can't tell you, I think, how important it is that you did a topic on RadarScreen, because we have so many people here at TradersCoach.com using RadarScreen, and I think they kind of only scratched the surface on what it's capable of. It is a very robust program, and it has a lot of flexibility in it, and I think you covered really some really major and main points on how to use it. So we've recorded this, and we're going to have this available for everybody to review again and again and again, because when you watch it a second time, I think you'll probably pick up some things you missed the first time. So again, super presentation. We'd love to have you back, and again, I want to just thank you so much for being here. All right. Well, I think, folks, that pretty much ends tonight's presentation. We'll leave the room open for a little while longer so you can write down Jeffrey's information here and give him a holler either via email or telephone. And so there you have it. So, Stan, I will see you next Wednesday at the pre-market brief. And then I'm also looking forward to doing the Spotlight On with you all on February 4th. That will be a lot of fun for me as well. So, Stan, thank you for taking the time and speaking to us tonight. And I want to thank everybody out there, of course, for taking the time for being here. So we'll go ahead and leave the room open, and we'll sign off in just a minute. You guys have a great week. Thank you so much.